You never left me alone for a minute. You made a fool out of me in front of everybody, and now you're trying to steal my house.
Oh, no.
I heard you! That's why you're trying to fire me. You made me hate myself. I thought a lot about it. Hating myself. Well, I like myself now. You killed my friend.
I killed who?
How did Socrates feel when you stuck him like this? How did Socrates feel?
Well, who the hell is Socrates?
Socrates was the best friend I ever had. A dog! Tear him up!
A modern-day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Layer Kick. A Coen brothers end up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel. Alvin and the Chipmunks deserve another squeak. There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
On our recent journey exploring movie titles from A to Z, we decided to focus on the 1988 fantasy classic Willow as our W movie. The film was directed by Ron Howard and starred Warwick Davis, Val Kilmer, Joanne Whalley, and Billy Barty, among others, and was followed up by a board game, video games, a series of novels, and most recently a 2022 television series for Disney+. As mentioned on that episode of the podcast, much controversy surrounds the Willow television series, as it was mysteriously and unceremoniously dropped from the streamer only a few months after its finale dropped. But Disney+, which launched at the end of 2019, debuted a number of quite successful programs, some lasting as many as 4 seasons. Some of their original program with the strongest longevity are High School Musical, the series, which ran for 38 episodes, Star Wars The Bad Batch, which ran for 47 episodes, and animated MCU program What If, which ended after episode 26. What If is an extension of the Marvel Universe and explores different potential timelines given the theory that infinite concurrent universes exist simultaneously, which is explored throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The show is presented by a character known only as Uatu the Watcher, who is voiced by cinema and television icon Jeffrey Wright. The Watcher is a legacy Marvel character existing first in the Fantastic Four comics. When interviewed by DiscussingFilm.net's Andrew J. Salazar, What If showrunner Ashley Bradley explained that the Watcher can be compared to Matt Little, who in 2014 recorded a video in New York City of a rat dragging a slice of pizza down the subway platform, which quickly went viral. Bradley explains that Little is just observing a slice of life with no interest in interfering, becoming friends with the rat, or doing rat things. Pizza Rat is now in the upper echelon of pop culture rats, alongside Splinter from the Ninja Turtles, Remy from Ratatouille, beloved Muppet Rizzo, the rat from The End of the Departed, and Ben, the frenemy of our protagonist in this episode's film. Greetings, Starfighters, this is Ruined Childhoods. I'm John, here as always with my brother Dan, and we're talking about Willard, the story of a troubled incel who finds courage and purpose thanks to a few hundred rats. Dan, what's your ideal pet?
My ideal pet.
Because I've never known you to be a pet guy.
I'm not a pet guy. I'm trying to think of my ideal pet. It's kind of like, all right, what would be something that I could call a pet, but like does not live in, like, would it be something like a horse or,
oh, are you a horse guy?
No, okay. I'm not a horse guy, but that's the thing, like what's my ideal pet? I guess just like the most well-trained, most obedient, chill dog ever to exist.
Okay.
So
maybe you can have one of Barbara Streisand's dog clones.
Yeah, like
if they're good enough for her.
Well, But do we encounter the multiplicity problem where once we start making too many clones, I feel like I
think
want
that
the early clone.
I think that she still just makes clones from the original DNA.
Oh, right. So, because it's not a copy of a copy, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I would take a dog that is genetically engineered just to be the dog I need it to be, which
Okay.
it sounds really
but
sick
it would be
because
dog.
it's taking a lot of yes.
Okay.
Yes. If I'm thinking of an animal, like what type of animal that I would want to be my reliable companion, I would choose a dog.
Well, if we think about different pet scenarios, of course you have dog and cat, and then you have things like birds and rodents, which we'll talk about more soon. And then there's lizards, snakes, things like that.
No.
But you're
As
thinking
you said,
somewhere in
John,
the
I'm
dog
not a
category.
pet. I'm not a pet guy, but if I was, I'm just trying to think about like the ease of care and
The reality
I imagine,
of the
like,
situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, John, you're a longtime dog owner. You
Yeah.
have also been a cat owner.
The cat
So
thing
is there-
was kind of foisted upon me. I was gifted a cat. And so that's how
you had cats.
I only
You
ever
had cats
had
in.
I only ever had one cat.
There was a Philly cat. Okay. Because there was a
Right.
Philly cat, and I know there was at least one LA cat.
Okay. Cats that I lived with in Los Angeles. One of them was a girlfriend's cat, not my cat. Another one. Okay, so I lived in this one apartment in Los Angeles in the Los Feliz area, and there was a cat named Doug who would frequent my apartment, not my cat, and would
Right.
come and hang out with us, and we'd just let him in and give him some water and have some food for him. And then what we later found out is that pretty much every other apartment was like feeding this cat, and it was just living the greatest life. And we called him Doug, but all of the other apartments had different names for him. And I
Right.
don't even know what his real name was, but once we finally all came together and discussed the situation, it was like, oh, okay. Got it. We will stop feeding this cat. But
It's like Doug.
that's
Do you mean
kind of
mittens?
where.
Do you mean mittens? That's what I've been saying.
right.
Is mittens, and they're like, wait, Casper, huh? Wait,
Yeah,
Casper
no.
the friendly cat.
That was a cool cat. Other cats in Los Angeles, I don't think that I lived with any other cats in LA.
I mean, maybe it's just because there were cats that I stayed in your home in two different cities where there were cats. So
That's fair.
Yeah,
In Philadelphia,
true,
I had Topanga, and
yes.
and when I moved to Los Angeles, it did not make sense. It would not have been good for this cat to come with me, and so my
Ironically.
roommate at the time stayed. Ironically, very much so, stayed in Philadelphia with my roommate at the time. And so, yeah, but that was also a cat that was gifted to me. It was not one that I had requested. Very much similarly to the way that the cat in this movie that we're going to be talking about enters our protagonist's, if you would call him that, life.
Indeed. Yeah. So then what is is the dog your ideal animal companion? Yeah.
Of course it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And I'm looking at my guy over here right now. He's just chilling on the couch. He's a good dude. He's a good one. And I lucked out because I did a very poor job training him, but he is a cool guy.
He took care of himself. Yeah. He's like, I get it. You got a lot going on.
He just
I'll
sighed.
figure
He
this
like
out.
heard me and he's like, oh, geez, he's talking about me again.
Yeah. What can I say? Nothing, really.
But yeah, for me it's all about the dog. I have no
Definitely not a
interest
rat.
in definitely not a rat. I did live with, was it a hamster or a gerbil? The roommate who ended up taking care of Topanga at one point got a hamster or a gerbil. I don't know the difference between the two species, and that thing was a nightmare.
It's an alligator crocodile thing for me, and it's like I feel more confident differentiating a crocodile from an alligator.
Right. Crocodiles are in like Australia.
I mean, yeah. Other than geography, but
Right.
but yeah, hamster, gerbil. I guess I've never been afraid of one enough to feel like I need to know.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to
But,
call 911 and say an alligator bit my leg off when it was really a crocodile. They'll send the
I know
wrong
they'd make
team.
fun of you so hard. Right. But also, like, I have heard nothing but good things about pet rats. I hear that they are actually very affectionate and playful and don't bite the way that you think that they would, and very dissimilar to what we see in the movie Willard. And granted, domesticated rats are quite different from, like street rats that you would see in any city or, certain places where you see, rats living underneath houses and things like that. That's a different story.
Or evil rats.
Or evil rats. Or
Yeah.
vigilante rats who train their family of mutant turtles.
Well, that's true. No, that's adoptive parent rats who no. That's the very best kind. You want, if you are a rat parent, you don't want your child to be a Ben. You want your child to be a split. I assume, because I'm assuming the best here of rats that, you want be a Splinter.
Be a Splinter. Be a Socrates.
Be a Socrates. Why not? Yeah. Anyway, before we start referencing anything before I synopsize and we get into this.
Go ahead and synopsize, and then I'm dying to know if this is maybe your first time watching the movie. So go ahead and synopsize, and I really want to get into this thing.
Oh, here we go. Willard Stiles is a socially awkward young man who lives with his domineering mother and feels out of place both at home and at work. Bullied by his cruel boss and isolated from society, Willard finds companionship in a group of rats he befriends and trains, particularly a clever one named Socrates and a more aggressive rat named Ben. As his resentment grows, Willard uses the rats to exact revenge, leading to increasingly dark and violent consequences. In the original Willard, which was directed by Daniel Mann, based on the novel Ratman's Notebooks, we have we have Bruce Davison.
Yeah,
in what was a breakout role for him as Willard. And that movie also features Ernest Borgnine, Elsa Lanchester, the Bride of Frankenstein.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And Sandy Dennis.
Right. Sandra
who plays
Locke.
the Sandra Locke. Sorry, not Sandy Dennis. Sandra Locke.
Yeah.
That's who I meant to say. Wrong, Sandy. Doesn't that always happen? So
it always happens.
Yeah,
literally every time.
There's and then of course we should. I mean, I feel like let's just kind of talk about the remake or reboot. Now, actually, we should first mention that there was a sequel to the 1971 Willard, 1972's Ben, which is probably best known for the song it spawned, which was Michael Jackson's first solo
hit.
Solo recording. And and interestingly enough, Michael Jackson as a child, and we don't need to go any farther into that topic, but was like befriended. We know, if you know about Michael Jackson, that, animals, and he
Right.
had a lot of different animals around the ground, around his house. I remember the story Lionel Richie tells on
Of the
the We Are
snake.
the World documentary, where they're like, he's sitting there and there's a snake, and Michael's just totally chill
A
with it.
snake that Michael
But
had
as a
lost.
child, oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's
Man.
where he went.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
terrifying.
But so, oh, it sure is. It sure is. But yeah, Michael did not discriminate, and rats were, yeah, he like befriended rats. And I remember seeing a scene, and it's always weird because I've always been like, am I combining things in my mind? Because I remember like the Jacksons, An American Dream miniseries, where like a young Michael Jackson is in the like Jackson family kitchen late at night after everyone is bed, and everyone's in bed, and whatever, he's been yelled at by their father, and there's
Right.
like a little rat that comes out into it. And I'm like, wait a second, didn't he call the rat Ben? And I'm like, did Michael Jackson have a pet rat named Ben when he was
Did he?
a little kid?
Is this canon or is
It
this
was,
head canon?
no, I looked it up, and he did
Okay.
have, like, it was, as his siblings attested to, he did have a fondness for rodents, and like kind of, I don't think he had one named Ben, but
Right. Okay.
he ended up doing this song for the sequel, which is where Willard is more of kind of the character study of Willard. Ben is it's Attack of the Killer Rats.
Yeah, it's the Blob.
And it involves like a little,
right.
It's the Blob. It's kind of The Shining a little bit, a few years before The Shining. So,
Right, yeah.
cause it, involves this boy who has this psychic connection, to the rats. And I didn't get I watched half of that.
Oh, I watched the whole
entirely through
thing.
it.
It is wild. It is absolutely, fascinating to watch. I enjoyed myself. You have Meredith Baxter in there. So that's fun.
Right.
The kid who plays the kid, I don't even remember his name, but he's
Danny.
fun to watch. It's a strange story, what I find interesting about it is that it takes place like immediately after the events of Willard, and so it's like, well, when you finish watching Willard, you just have to watch Ben, and then you watch the Willard remake, and then you've completed the series.
Well, and then the Willard remake in 2003, which starred Crispin Glover as Willard, it kind of claims to incorporate elements of both Ben and Willard to kind of,
it's like 95% Willard.
Right. Yeah. No. It is most, it definitely changes a few things, to kind of go through some of the, and like, it was really, I don't know about you. This was my first time seeing any of them. And like, there were things that I liked about this. There were things I liked more about the original. And then there were other things that I liked, that I enjoyed more.
Well,
about
how
the
about
2003.
This? Let's talk a little bit about the 1971 Willard, and then we'll kind of then bounce between the others, because there's so much to discuss, and I want to make sure that we're giving the original Willard its due. First of all, I want to talk about Bruce Davison, who, when I saw him on screen, I was like, ooh, as soon as I saw him, I was like, I like this guy. And then when I looked him up, because Bruce Davison is not somebody who I know by name, but I definitely know by face. And when I saw him, I was like, oh my God, it's that guy. He is like one of those people who I feel encapsulates the idea of being that guy. That you've seen him in a dozen things, and you might not know his name, but you know him, and you know that when you see him in something, you're just like, okay, Here we go.
You probably, I would say maybe like his role in X-Men or any, I feel like he's played other like unlikable politician roles.
Yeah.
But also played, he was nominated for an Oscar for the film Longtime Companion. I believe about, gay men during the, facing the AIDS crisis. And he was nominated for that. I want to say that was a 1989 or 1990 film. And then when they adapted Harry and the Hendersons to a TV series, he took on the John Lithgow role.
Awesome. I didn't know that. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps we'll talk about that when we get to our H episode.
Oh,
I think that's actually episode 300, if you believe it.
Holy cow.
I know. So, the 1971 Willard, I really enjoyed it. It was one, going into this, all I really knew about Willard is that it had something to do with a guy and rats, and that was based off of just cursory knowledge of the 2003 Crispin Glover Willard. And then it was like, there's an original one from 1971. And what I really enjoyed about this movie is that if you're going into it cold, it really is a wild ride of like seeing how it takes shape, and it goes against your expectations for the soundtrack that's happening, the score that's happening, and kind of the color palette of the movie. And you're learning about this guy and his mother and their relationship. And, we really get to know him first at like his birthday party, where it's really just her friends. And it very quickly goes from celebration to them judging him, especially his mother. And you really start to feel for this guy. And throughout the course of the movie, you understand him. And then as it goes on, you're just like, oh no, Willard, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
And then when the character of his secretary, who becomes a friend, when she comes into play, it's just like, oh, but look, here's somebody who wants to be in your life. And it's like, oh, please just come on, stick with that and find a way to get rid of these rats now, because they're about to become a huge problem.
Yeah. It's like you're not past the point of no return yet, but you're getting there.
I know. Right. But he is his own worst enemy, despite the fact that Ben becomes his, maybe no. He is still his own worst enemy.
Well, because he creates Ben.
He creates Ben, yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought that they did a really good job. And I will say this, like, same with the 2003 remake. I feel like the way that they show Ben and let your mind do the work, it doesn't show Ben doing all of the things. It shows the aftermath of the things, and then it cuts to just Ben sitting there, and your mind is doing all of the work, and Bruce Davison or Crispin Glover, like, they're also doing some of the work to really show you the catastrophe that's been caused by this menace. And I really credit the film for not trying to do something where it's like showing Ben set off on a course of destruction, because that's when it becomes like, oh boy, here we go. But instead, I was just like, oh boy, here we go.
Right. Yeah. It was fun. And of course, like, you go into this and this is not like a big budget. It was released by Cinerama Releasing Corporation. So like we're
Bing
talking
Crosby
about
Productions. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Bing Crosby Productions. But I don't think Bing was involved.
No, this is post Bing involvement.
Yeah. So but it's really, so you really appreciate like how they did that, like you were describing, because it's also, and this is what made these movies so great. And I mean, like, I know Jaws definitely had a bigger budget, but we know it applies to Jaws, is that like, oh, you can't do all the things that you imagine. So what do? You get creative, and you use editing, and you just get a whole lot of footage of those rats. And then you're like, okay, we're going to use that one there. And it is done really well in this movie. And, you know, this is especially the 1971 version, because it's so much, it's sincere, and Bruce Davison's performance is very, you know, as you indicated, sympathetic. And you understand him, and you understand, and which is why you don't want him to go as far as he goes. So seeing this version in like a fun, like a crowded theater would be a lot of fun.
Right. And just to kind of jump back a little bit, the fact that they, you know, it was real rats, and let's just hope that everything was done on the up and up. But in the 71, I don't think that there were any like puppets used. At least if they did, then they were done really, really well. But I don't believe that there were any puppets used. And in the 2003 version, I'd say there's probably extremely minimal CGI. Maybe just the shot where they're all pouring out of the elevator. That's the only one I could imagine, which is an amazing shot, and I love that. But in the original, it's the rat acting is extremely strong, and I feel like Bruce Davison, you know, acting to himself pretty much is really compelling and convincing in creating these rich lives of these rats, especially Socrates and Ben.
Well, and another thing I was thinking about watching it was like, all right, let's assume that maybe Bruce Davison is not someone who naturally would be so comfortable with rats. He really, I mean, and like that, that's your job as an actor, but like knowing that these are real rats, and so just knowing that, and thinking like, wow, like as an actor, if that's something you have a problem with, you have to really suppress that. And he does such a wonderful job and in this role. And it was great to see a different side of Bruce Davison.
Right. Yeah. Well, also, I feel like we see a very different side, at least from what I'm used to, of Ernest Borgnine.
Yes.
And, you know, when I think of Ernest Borgnine, I think of somebody that's smiling, and, you know, an older person who's maybe a little on the silly side.
You think of his character in Basketball, don't you?
Basketball. I mean, he's been in a zillion things. And
you kids with your Dan Fogelberg.
Yeah, I think that he is just such a, I guess, in my mind, a positive, I don't know, like his performances are all very light.
He's Marty. He's Marty.
I think that's kind of the core of it, is that he's Marty. And to see him as, you know, I don't know, the bad guy really in this, you know, I guess as far as humans go, he's the worst one. And, you know, he plays Willard's boss, who is trying to convince Willard to sell his house, especially after his mother dies, to him, which honestly, he should sell the house. He does not need to be living in such a big house and with such a financial strain. But he wants to sell it to him so that he can tear it down and build apartments, which he's not telling Willard, but Willard finds out.
Right. And sorry, just to add a little bit of context, because I just realized we have not mentioned this. Willard's father started the company with Mr.
Martin
Borgnine. Mr. Martin, right?
Mhm.
They started the company together, but then there was the death of Willard's father,
Right.
which there's like some, I feel like there's some, is there, maybe it's more in the remake where
In the
there's
remake,
some,
they explain a little bit more, but Willard does confront Mr. Martin once he has gained confidence because of Ben.
yeah,
He confronts Mr. Martin and he says, like, you know, you, this work, like, and your work with him, like, it killed him, and that destroyed my mother. And it's all because of you, essentially. In the 2003 version, they go into more detail about, like, you know, what happened to the father, who is in photographs portrayed by Bruce Davison, which is very
yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah, that was very cool.
Paintings and photographs. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's a nice it's a nice nod, and yes, nicely done. We're not
Yeah.
forcing anything. We're not
It's
having
an
Bruce
if you know,
Davison.
you know situation.
Exactly. And if you don't, no big deal.
No big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, but staying on the original, how did you feel about the like the Sandra Locke character and her? Wouldn't think twice about like her being nice to someone who's a new coworker. And she's brought in as a temp to kind of help with Willard's like backlog.
Yes. So to give a little bit more background, I guess, you know, Willard is consistently being hassled in front of all of his colleagues about being behind on his work. They work in some sort of factory. They're in the office. You know, there's some sort of smelt situation.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, they're a factory. There's like manufacturing, shipping. I don't think that we ever get into what is, and also like in the 71 version, it's in Los Angeles.
Right.
In the 2003 version, it's New York.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so it's some sort of manufacturing thing, and they work in the administrative component to it. And so Willard is being pressured by his mother and his mother's friends to assert himself more at work and vie for a vice president role because he deserves it. It is his family business. But Mr. Martin, who controls everything, when he's around Willard's mom, which happens quite a few times, is nothing but pleasant and such a lighthearted guy. But when they're at work, he just berates him in front of everybody and yells at him nonstop. And it's no surprise that they cast Arlie Ermy in the 2003 version to play him. But
I was going to say in the 2003 version, he's much Borgnine at least like has this, like there's the facade of kindness. And then there's the Willard. I just want to help you out. And like, you know, he's he's two-faced, but Arlie Ermy as Martin is just straight up like, Willard, you pathetic walking piece of crap.
I do like how
does what Arlie Ermy got paid to do.
Yeah, exactly. I do like how in each version they portray Mr. Martin as being horny in different ways. In the 1971 version, he's, you know, tickling the secretary and you know, playing handsies, you know, in the supply closet or whatever. And in the 1971 version, he's like looking at weird internet porn.
Right. Early 2000s. The Willard remake is so that early 2000s movie. It's like, maybe it's just because like I'm me, but I wouldn't have to know. I'm like, oh, this must have been released in like maybe March. And it has very much
March
that, like,
14th, 2003.
Fuck yeah. It just has that vibe of like, this was something that they could promote and that maybe didn't have as much competition at the time it was released.
And I don't really remember it being released to much fanfare. I think it just was put out there a little bit.
I feel like it was
also-
one of those, if I may,
Go ahead.
just
Go ahead.
because I remember the advertising, and I think this was kind of also after like Crispin Glover had kind of gained more of that cult status and that cult following, and like he'd been in Charlie's Angels, and then
Right.
so putting him in this, it was like one of those like, oh, it's the perfect match. Like this 1970s movie that people have heard of, but maybe haven't seen, or they haven't seen it in a long time. And we get Crispin Glover, who like, this is like the role he was born to play.
Sure.
But
He's
I
a
remember it
weirdo.
being right. I remember it being one of those movies that it was almost like when they started trying to make cult movies.
Yeah.
Rather than just making a movie and letting it become a cult movie.
So the 2003 Willard was written and directed by Glenn Morgan, produced by Glenn Morgan and James Wong. And they were a team that was responsible for some of the X-Files most talked about episodes, probably. And that gave a lot of humor to the X-Files and, really brought the weirdness to the next level on that show. So they were responsible for a lot of that. And I know that they had some sort of falling out with Chris Carter at some point, but they were really core creative minds for some, X-Files episodes that really took off. And in this movie, it makes sense that they would go on to do this. And I would say, like, it does seem to me like there was a lot of influence from, Tim Burton in a lot of the design for Willard in 2003.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like the production designer was just heavily influenced by that whole vibe. One thing I will say that the 2003 version got right was the amount of rat shit on the floor.
Yes, absolutely.
1971, you don't see any little pellets, but in 2003, it's everywhere. And I feel like that is so real. That is so real.
They made a point of it. Some the art director on that was like, no, we're not going to mess this up. Like the second go around, no, we will learn from the mistakes of the past. Like just minefield of rat crap.
Totally. And honestly, it's
actually,
like,
sorry, just to go back.
I was saying that was probably the most CGI was probably the rat crap. But that's okay. It worked for me.
Just going back to Glenn Morgan's credits, and to tie, we have a Final Destination installment currently in theaters. Yeah. He was the writer on the original Final Destination, and
which
Final
I think
Destination
was
3.
supposed to be an X-Files, maybe an X-Files movie or something like that. Is that right?
I heard it was about like an episode of the X-Files.
I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Got expanded into a film. So but
film franchise.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What is it? 6? Is the 6th one out now?
I don't know. I've only seen the first one.
Right, as have I. I've seen the opening to the second one, whichever one with the
Devon Sawa, Ali Larder.
Yeah.
Just naming names.
All-star.
Sean William Scott?
No. I'm not looking at the information, but I just got to say no.
I think that he was in. Wasn't he in that?
No,
I think
Kerr
that it was
Smith was in it.
Who was?
Kerr Smith, Tony Todd.
Tony Todd.
Oh, wait, hold on. Sean William Scott was in the original.
Told you. I freaking told you.
Wow.
It's not like a Sean William Scotty type character. It's more subdued, if you could imagine.
Right, but I mean, it's
I think that this was like
Stifler,
concurrent.
so you just.
I think that it was filmed after American Pie, but American Pie hadn't come out yet. So like he hadn't.
I mean, American Pie came out before Final Destination.
Did it? I feel like there was something about, him not being super famous yet.
Destination might have been filmed before American Pie came out. American Pie came out in like July, I want to say July 30th or July 31st, 1999. And Final Destination, according to Wikipedia, came out March 17th, 2000.
Yeah, I think that it was filmed before American Pie came out. I think that that's the deal.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, not totally irrelevant, but barely relevant, because I don't know that I would.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No. I was to say, like, I feel like, talking about Glenn Morgan and James Wong, also appropriate to mention him as well. Their legacy is very strong, and I don't know how many other films they did like before Willard, or I don't really know what their trajectory was. Aside from, Final Destination and everything. I'm actually I was gonna say, I didn't think that there was too much. Filmography. Yeah. Okay. So 2006 Black Christmas, which was the same year as Final Destination 3. They did Millennium 96 to 98. Yeah. Interesting. Wrote The Boys Next Door, like James Wong. I'm looking at
James Wong directed The One with Jet Li.
Oh, okay.
And then he co-wrote that with I saw that in the theater.
Yeah. So interesting.
Back in the day.
So anyway, it's nice to see. I don't know what Glenn Morgan's been up to more recently, but cool career. Some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, and enjoyed the Willard remake. Absolutely.
It was enjoyable. And I thought that there were some good decisions made. Now, before what do you got?
I know, because I have I was gonna say, in comparison, I feel like the relationship between Willard and Catherine in the remake, but
right.
The relationship definitely feels more forced in the remake. It feels a little more natural and believable.
And that's Laura Elena Herring in the remake.
Yeah. Of Mulholland Drive.
Of Mulholland Drive. Mm-hmm.
Most notably. I mean,
absolutely,
I can't think of anything else that, there's that great line, and there are some great lines throughout. Like, I love the scenes with Willard and his mother's friend who's constantly at the house haranguing him. But the line where he's talking to Martin, and it's in the scene when he says, "You made me hate myself. Right now, this moment, I like myself."
It's
one of the few lines I think is exactly the same.
And it's so powerful. Yeah, exactly. It's so good. Yeah. One of the lines that I liked in the 2003 version, I don't think that this was in the 71 version, and I think that this was to Martin, but somebody's telling him, like, sell the house, get a small place, and I think this might have been like after he had already been fired, and he says, like, they're just like, and then you can start over. And he goes, "Start over. I'm almost done." And it's one of those moments where you're just like, right? Like, this is somebody who's like been feeling like, I've been trying so hard for so long. Like, I'm so close to getting what I want, even though I'm not quite sure what it is. I feel like I'm right on the cusp of it. And it's like, you got to start over. And I liked that line. I thought that was good. And Crispin Glover, the delivery was great. But yeah, I feel like there are some really strong moments in both of them. I felt like the things that were added for the remake worked because they were either added because they might appeal to a 2003 audience a little bit more. It's of course updated, as we mentioned, Arlie Army and the internet porn situation, but like, and also like we mentioned, there's this shot of Willard coming up in the elevator at the office when he's about to confront Martin, and there's like a flood of rats pouring down, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's like a trailer shot right there.
And oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it looks like something that would be out of like a good Batman movie.
Totally.
And in Crispin Glover, it makes me believe that they were using real rats. Just the fact that they cast Crispin Glover.
God,
I'm like,
what a treat.
They cast a guy who could make this work.
Yeah.
And yeah, he sure did. It was, I have to like, yeah, there were definitely things I enjoyed about both. And I think the original is the one that I would love to see in like, a packed theater. But the 2003, I would love to watch on VHS at a sleepover.
That feels appropriate. Okay. So Dan, I want to kind of take things back for a second. So we have a deeply isolated, emotionally repressed, and powerless protagonist who bonds with an untraditional partner that helps him assert control over his world, but it comes at a cost. He resorts to violent rebellion as a means of regaining power and agency in a world where he feels oppressed. His grasp on reality weakens as his inner turmoil becomes externalized and his partner turns against him. As a result, he tries to destroy the very thing that gave him confidence so he can reclaim his own humanity. Dan, am I talking about Willard or am I talking about Fight Club?
I knew where I had a feeling that's where you were going.
Did you have this thought too?
So,
that Ben is Tyler Durden?
No, I did not think that. I was definitely making connections between this and Little Shop of Horrors, but not as the fight. But in terms of the like, meek that meek person gaining confidence and power and control, but kind of having to sacrifice something. Your Fight Club connection is, you can go much farther. You can connect a lot more dots there.
Absolutely. So also, I mean, if you really want to take it a step further, we don't necessarily see anybody interacting with Ben. We see people interacting with Socrates, but we don't really see anybody else interacting with Ben, I don't think, until the movie Ben.
Right.
So it's almost like, is there a Ben, or is that him projecting and kind of seeing this thing and kind of taking on its inspiration a little bit and wrestling with himself along the way? I mean, there are other rats there when Ben does create destruction. It's or we don't see it. Like we mentioned before, we don't actually see the stuff that Ben does. So like if we see Ben, eating away at the bottom of a door, there's other rats there too. So just saying, we might have a Tyler Durden situation.
Wow. That's cool. That makes a lot of sense.
I don't know.
It makes a lot of sense.
I did not read the book, the Ratman's Notebooks.
Yeah.
I don't know how faithful this movie or either movie is to the source material. All I'm saying is that there's something
not
there.
Sure.
Yeah. But let's talk about Ben for a second, and then we'll move on a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
So, okay, you didn't watch all of Ben, right?
No, but I was like, if we look in cinematic history, is Ben the first film that could be called a squeakquel?
Yeah, I mean, maybe there are some animated ones, but I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, if we're talking 71, 72.
I feel like maybe Alvin and the Chipmunks, are a little debt of gratitude.
As mentioned in our theme song. It's true. Yeah. So I feel like
squeakquels.
yeah, I find that I find Ben so fascinating because it's coming off of this movie that, I don't know, comes from a place of curiosity, and you don't know what you're getting yourself into when you go into it. And to recreate that for Ben is definitely tricky because they're trying to do it with a child. They're trying to, of course, elevate the horror aspect of it while still keeping it very light. I mean, it is a musical.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. Danny writes songs and he performs marionette puppet shows.
Yeah.
For Ben.
It's a very curious movie. Right. And so for that one, they're saying like, oh, we found these diaries that were kept by Willard. And so we know that there's a rat named Ben. And in the world of Ben, the kid, he overhears that and so grasps on to this idea and then meets Ben and bonds with him. But the kid has like a heart condition and it's all over the place.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's got the overprotective mother and like Meredith Baxter's like his older sister.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought that she was great.
Yeah. It's, I mean, like I'll finish it. I'll definitely get back to it.
Will you?
But I don't know. Maybe I'm no guarantee. No guarantee. But it was interesting enough where I feel like if it stays in my like continue watching queue for a while, it's something where I might go back to it and be like, hey, I got a half hour to kill. Let's see what happens.
There you go. Fair enough. I mean, tell you what, nothing shocking.
And nothing shocking. I mean, at this point with Ben, who knows what could be.
Right.
It's also interesting because you look at Ben and it's like, it's one of these like, young, lonely child has a supernatural connection, but this is before even The Exorcist. It's before The Omen. It's before The Shining, even the novel. It's before the novel. So it's like, it's kind of like, did Ben inspire more than it's worth? Like, were the returns greater than the investment, I guess, on Ben?
You know what? They took a swing and it didn't exactly hit. That's all.
No, but you also got the song out of it. You got like Michael Jackson's first solo single.
Well, and that's, just kind of, I feel like a lot of luck on their side that Michael Jackson went on from the Jackson 5 to become such a successful solo artist. And I think that it's because of his career after that like people still think about that song. Otherwise, I think it could have been one that like was popular at the time and then just faded away.
No, yeah, it has nothing to do with the movie.
No. I mean, it has nothing to do with the song itself either. I mean, I can see how it would have been, I don't know, a popular song at the time, but it wouldn't have had longevity. And it's not like people are always listening to Ben now, but I feel like it comes up from time to time in its own context, but that's because he became super famous.
Right. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I'm looking.
So, all right.
Looking,
what are we going to do with this thing?
Well, I'm just going to say, Phil Carlson, who directed Ben. I'm also looking to see some of the other stuff that he did and Ben was one of his last films. He did a couple after that. He did The Wrecking Crew in '69.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that's, one of the few. Well, he's a Kid Galahad with Elvis. Aside from that, it's just a bunch of, dime a dozen. He did Lorna Doone.
He seems
51.
He seems just like the guy, like one of like the director under contract with the studio, and like, all right, this is what you're doing next, and he did it.
Phoenix City Story is one of his. That was a bigger one. But anyway, you were talking about what we're gonna do with this movie, because that's what this podcast does. We talk about what we would do to extend a film's legacy. I think that what I would do is, I mean, I don't know if it necessarily needs one, but I feel like a series would be appropriate and fun, and to not so much focus on the ways that Ben, and if we're going with Ben and Willard in this story, not the ways that Ben leads to Willard's demise, but they could have a complicated relationship. And yeah, but I don't know if we also need like hundreds of thousands of rats the way that we see in the movie. I like the whole Socrates and Ben, yin and yang of it all, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that we need like the whole horde of rats. But I think that a series that follows along the story of Willard and Ben, I think that would make sense to me.
And you could go a little further. There's kind of like a hint of it, but maybe with a series that's more focused on just like Willard and Ben and Socrates. It's kind of the angel and devil on your shoulder
Yeah.
idea, which was something that I was like, like that's maybe something that they're going for. And then I was like, nah, I don't think they really went for that. But
yeah, I mean, it's the balance. And then once Mr. Martin kills Socrates,
yeah, well,
there's no balance left.
No,
the scales have been tipped.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess, yeah, they did. But yeah, that's, I feel like you could work something out with that. You could work out a series.
What would you do?
It could work. So I would do a musical.
Of course.
I would incorporate elements from Ben as well. Yes, the song, but it would have to be, and this is where I feel like I'm like, I made a critique earlier or about like trying to make a cult something. But I feel like Willard the musical could only work if you went super bizarre with it, like Fringe Festival. Like I would want like people in the costumes. Like there's a way you could go about this where you're using recordings or puppetry. Like Julie Taymor could do Willard much in the style of The Lion King. And but I like the idea of having people in rat costumes and having like actors coming out like this and having Ben be like a character, like somebody in a rat costume who sings, and having like Ben be like the Javert to Socrates' Valjean, and have them singing off together, and bring in the Danny character somehow. I mean, he's a neighbor. He lives in the neighborhood.
That's true. Yeah.
So bringing him in, I would keep, I would keep like the mother and the mother's friends, because that gives you a lot of space for comic relief and fun musical numbers. I think there's a lot of fodder for fun musical numbers, for campy duets with, the Sandra Locke character and Willard. I feel like it would make a great showcase. It would be fun, not to mention the number of movies. Holy cow. Cause I recently looked at a catalog for licensing of musicals, and it was like every page was a different movie adaptation, and
really
some of which we've talked, like the Grumpy Old Men the musical. Absolutely, why not? Ghost, that was on Broadway too, but then there was like there was another one that was like, wait a second, when did they make it? Like there's Flashdance is in there,
Empire Records,
right yeah. So
Willard
the musical,
in your musical, would it be a horror in the vein of Little Shop? like a
Yeah,
comedy
kind of like
horror?
that, or maybe more like Carrie the musical, which I haven't heard the music in quite a long time, and I've never seen it, but just kind of like pumping up that stage horror and do a show that's fun to get into, and the whole if you're sitting in the first few rows, I hope you're not I hope you don't mind rats.
So
and just having lots of little rubber rats.
Yeah. I will say this, and this is something that I thought about before I thought about the Tyler Durden of it all. But when I first put on the 1971 Willard, just from like the first few scenes and the way that Willard was looked upon by his family, and by that I mean his mom and her friends, it reminded me a lot of the beginning of Harvey, where it's like this family who's just like, oh, we got this weird family member and we got to figure out what to do with him. And nobody wants to deal with him pretty much. And I feel like there's a way that you could handle it similarly to Harvey, where it doesn't have to be an imaginary rat. It could be a real rat, but here's our guy Willard, and he's just a weird rat guy. And that could be just out in the open rather than his little secret or something.
Oh, yeah.
Just saying.
True. Why not? Why hide it?
Yeah.
Why not? Hey, it's like the end of, the first Iron Man movie. Tony Stark just comes out and says it. I am Iron Man, Have Willard just be that rat guy. Maybe that's
I am Willard.
Yeah. That's the closing number of the musical there. Like, I am the Rat Man.
Yeah.
Cuckoo.
Yeah. If Ben doesn't bring him down, then it could be like, I have now evolved into my true self because of Ben. I don't know.
Who maybe or maybe doesn't exist.
Who maybe does or does not exist. Anyway, if all of y'all listening or watching on YouTube or Spotify have thoughts on how you would want to bring back Willard, email us ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Check out ruinedchildhoodspod.com for all sorts of fun stuff. Rate, review, subscribe, all of those things. Yeah. We are in our third season. We are going up and then back down the alphabet. We are back on our way down the alphabet. We did Z from 1969. We did Yojimbo. We did Xanadu. We just did Willard. Dan, what are we doing for our, V next?
V is, on the way down, V was for Vendetta. On the way back up, it's going to be for Victim. So we're doing the 1961 film Victim, directed by Basil Dearden, starring Dirk Bogarde and Sylvia Sims.
I'm psyched, dude.
Not a film that I imagine most people have heard of, but I'm psyched as well. Very, very much looking forward to watching this and chatting about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more on the episode itself, but I feel like it is similar to, how the movie Z is something where it's highly regarded, flew under the radar for a lot of people, shortly after it came out. But of course, heralded and highly regarded, but also it's it deals with important shit. And I feel like this is a big one that we have to talk about. And
ahead of its time.
If you don't know, definitely ahead of its time. And if you don't know, but appropriate for its time. But if you don't know what we're talking about, then you're going to want to listen to that episode because it's going to be a really good one. I am so excited. And as you were kind of describing, we're talking about our season and going up and down the alphabet. And if I don't see how this would ever happen as I'm not really a drinker, but if I'm ever in a field sobriety situation and I have to recite the alphabet backwards, I will be like, okay, Z, Yojimbo, Willard, Victim.
That's a good point. I doubt I'll be in that situation either, but I will keep that in mind.
Right. Well, Dan, as you are headed to your boss's office with your horde of rats, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.